Developments such as big data and advanced manufacturing have the capacity to be huge game changers where the circular economy is concerned. In this next session, Jad Oseran from IBM will be interviewing John Spear from right here at the Australian Industrial Transformation Institute around advanced manufacturing, Industry 4.0 and the circular economy.
Well, Jad, great to have you here in Australia for this terrific conference here at Tonsley. Look, we've just been through a mining boom here in Australia, which has brought great riches to the mining-rich states of Western Australia and Queensland and New South Wales. But now with the other side of that, a slump in mining has led to a substantial loss of economic activity and jobs. But tell us a bit more about this new mining boom that we might be able to have in Australia off the back of so-called urban mining.
Yes, thanks, John. Actually, it's a good point because it made me thinking while traveling here, and I was often curious about that starting point, which we often hear about. I mean, circular economy is about decoupling that economic growth at some point from the use of virgin resources. We're starting to see that decoupling happening when it comes to the energy sector, when we aim to decarbonize our energy sector and starting to rely more on renewable and decoupling from the fossil fuels. You see, if you look at the circular economy and trying to dematerialize the industrial sector, that point it's starting to happen actually. We're still far from it, but the conditions are starting to be ripe towards that goal. And the reason is, one of the important reasons is information technology and digital capabilities. We are able to capture more information around our surrounding, our industrial sector, our products, what's in our product, how are they connected, what's the journey. And that is important information to enable an alternative supply chain that we are used to, because that means that we can know more about the product specification, their condition, and that will imply trust in the supply chain and enable the transaction and selling to the demand sources that we usually have. So this is an aspect of where technologies like your integrated platform, but also blockchain, can also help this peer-to-peer exchange, peer-to-peer economy. And with urban miners, for example, harvesting components with some refurbishment from OEMs or from third parties, and beginning to provide these product components or material to the demand that we are used to. That's, of course, should be coupled with that business model innovation and that articulation. What does it mean for the new urban miner, the traditional demolition companies, to the construction company who could be saving some money while purchasing refurbished products. So you see a whole set of business model and value proposition which can also arise from that new aspect. So it can be seen either as a threat, actually, the circular economy to the traditional mining, or it can be seen as an opportunity, being in the extraction business, but instead of extracting from deep in the ground, extracting from our industrial surroundings.
Jad, can you give us an example of what this looks like in the real world, of a particular product that's transformed in this way?
Well, actually, we are seeing, if we look at IBM, our own company, where we also moved from the hardware manufacturer to services to cloud, cognitive computing, and with the industry context, we see that our own product have also went through transformation of upgradability. So we have actually criteria for our mainframe computers that you can only release them when there is a certain upgradability level in them. And that's part of our value proposition, which makes it that we can propose a higher value, residual value for these products to the client after 3 to 5 years by upgrading, or we harvest these components in our own supply chain. So we're actually taking back some of these components to internalize our supply chain and use them in our new product or in our spare parts for existing product. So that's an example where you are harvesting internally, but you are seeing now more and more examples of in the built environment, for example, where you are harvesting some of these modules or systems. Was it window frames? Was it doors? Was it cable trays? But the list of products is also extending in the built environment. And this is also helped by the move to a performance model by selling services, selling daylight instead of selling a facade, selling a vertical transport service instead of selling a lift. Automatically, these products are available to be supplied harvested further in the supply chain.
And what is the value proposition? And let's perhaps boil it down to what's the dividend that a company might expect from applying this sort of approach?
Of business models, you mean?
Yeah, or how much would it benefit them? Is there a sort of golden percentage improvement that you might be able to deliver through applying a solution like this?
Well, I would say that that's a way of differentiation. I mean, these companies who are especially asset-intensive companies providing physical product, that's an opportunity to augment your value proposition and reaching out to the end user. So instead of selling a building, having the end user of the building in place, so a real estate developer or a construction company is having in mind the productivity of the people using the building and not just the siloed approach of delivering a static entity, which is the building, a physical entity, static physical entity, which is the building, while taking that one step further and differentiating from the other developers out there, construction companies out there. And this is how they could manage to sell more per square meter. And there are examples of that in the Netherlands of some of these real estate developers. So I think it's an opportunity to differentiate in your value proposition, and it will also imply keeping a higher residual value of your product because you're designing it from the start for reversibility if it's a building or for upgradability if it's a product.
Jad, we've been talking today at this conference about how ideas around the circular economy might be reinforced by the so-called Industry 4.0 agenda. What are your thoughts about how they might be mutually reinforcing?
I think Industry 4.0 is one of the fundamental pillars to enable circular economy because you need to create that identity. Was it a building or was it a product? And that's one of the starting points. You need to know what do you have in your hands after a certain amount of usage. But that's not enough because you need to understand also how has it been used. What's the health of that product at the end of usage? Because that will define also the potential reuse value. And this is where connecting different components or products or materials even to some extent will enable you to understand better the potential value and also present in a marketplace to a professional buyer these kind of product in a trusted way. And this is where technologies like blockchain could help by certifying a certain maintenance operation or a certain testing or a certain certification that happened to these products. And this is where you tackle the trust aspect in a second-hand environment.
Just, for the listener, what's blockchain?
Well, blockchain, let's put it directly because I think people are confused enough with the general definition of blockchain. So for me, in the in the circular economy context, blockchain will be a key enabler, a key technological enabler to replicate and present that trust in the transactions and the event that will happen. And there are some key steps that needs to happen in the alternative supply chain of second-hand, and mainly is the maintenance operation, so capturing and recording that particular testing or maintenance or certification. And this is where you enable it through a blockchain. This will enable a peer-to-peer exchange. So we don't need necessarily, we are used in our traditional supply chain of having centralized parties producing semi-finished goods, then assembly. The only way to move from that traditional model to a more supply network model where different peers, and as an example in the built environment, urban miners, which can be smaller companies harvesting components, and provide this trustworthy source is through being able to articulate that we have had a certain testing or certification, and the buyer can trust that. So blockchain is that distributed record, distributed ledger, which will should provide this trusted source tag, if you want.
It's essentially sort of multiple encryption, isn't it? In order to provide privacy for data across networks? It's
a distributed, basically, ledger where at certain key events in your process, you are able to record a certain event. And actually, another benefit from using blockchain in the context of circular economy is that sometimes you don't want to share all the data with all the stakeholders in the value chain. If you are talking about material composition, maybe you would like to share it selectively with the certified recycler or certified company that is deconstructing this product, and you only want to share the deconstruction instructions or the material composition with these particular parties. And today that's one of the obstacles, I think, also in circular economy, that the original manufacturers or the chemical companies are not willing to share these kind of compositions. And that's part of their value proposition and differentiation. So actually, blockchain could also help tackle this selective sharing of data in the chain as well.
What have been some of the useful enablers, and by enablers I mean policy enablers in the European context that have helped accelerate the rollout of Industry 4.0 in the context of the circular economy? Here in Australia, we're trying to learn as much as we can to accelerate our own rollout of that, and so just wondering what are the key lessons?
I think so. We are not seeing in Europe hard binding targets yet. What we are seeing is setting the dot in the horizon. We're seeing also lots of initiatives at city level, which is also powerful and maybe easier to manage when you think at the country level. You don't need to boil the ocean. I think it's setting that dot on the horizon and also putting a framework to some extent. You have some initiatives at EU level, but also you have examples like the VAT tax in Sweden, where it was reduced from 25%, I think, to 12% for refurbished and repaired goods. That's encouraging that process of repairing and refurbishing. So you're seeing that public sector is starting to move. Of course, there's a lot still to do. For example, in the built environment, why not start integrating in your tenders for new buildings, in your public tenders, circular design for these buildings, but also the digital readiness, the digital requirement. We talked about building passports, that kind of foundational pillar to make sure that in the future, any kind of renovation, refurbishment, you can understand, you can know what kind of products are coming out, what's their status, and that will make them more ready to be circulated in the market again. So these kind of aspects from a policy point of view are important, but I would say one of the most important role that a municipality can play, as an example for a city, is the orchestrator role. We need somebody to start bringing these relevant parties in a certain industry. Was it the built environment, or was it the automotive, or even if you look at the mobility systems, to start bringing the right parties and doing a proof of value to show what is the value for the different stakeholders. And then you start bringing more and expand it to a broader system like a city, moving from the built environment to a city level, where you engage banks, municipalities, demolition companies, construction, real estate developer, housing associations, etc.
Thanks, Jad. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, John. You're welcome.